In this session of Bead Embroidery Basics, we're going to do the basic edge stitch. Now, this is also known as the sunshine edge, raw edge, standard edge, brick stitch edge. It is the most used edge stitch, and everybody does it and tends to give it their own nickname. It's all the same stitch. So what are we talking about here? We have done our bead embroidery and trimmed it. We've added our backing, and we've trimmed it. This is the point that we're going to put our edge on it. So this is our standard edge. So what is the purpose? Two things. It takes the two backings and it stitches them together. And the other thing is it applies beads on there because this is not particularly attractive. Now it is one of the most used edges because it is the perfect setup for other things that we want to do with our bead embroidery and finishing techniques. So when we want to add another finishing edge to it, it's the perfect setup. Taking two pieces and joining them together, adding fringe, creating a bail, and all our other decorative edges of what we want to do. So let's get to the stitch. This is kind of it. Now we're going to use an oversized example. And what I've got here, what I want you to imagine is that there's beads all over here. Here's my front side, and then here's my backing. Here's my two layers. So I want to start right about here. And where I'm starting is where it's straightest, because in the end when I fit it, it's easier to do a fit on a straight edge than on a corner or a sharp curve. So if I want to start here, what I'm actually going to do is go forward here, and from the back to the front, I'm going to do a stitch and pull till I've got a 6 to 9 inch tail. I am doing this anchor stitch in lieu of a stop bead. So then we get to the basics of our stitch. We pick up a bead, and we stitch through the backings. Hopefully we don't lose our needle. Okay, so we stitch through our backings. What I want you to do is position the bead like it's just going to sit. So it's going to sit up like that and then come up through the bead. The first one is going to get a little wobbly. Don't worry about it. Pick up a bead, stitch through the backings, get the bead in position, and come up through that bead. And then pull and get your tension. So that's your mantra. I'm going to pick up a bead. Now I'm stitching underneath any beads here, so I'm kind of pushing them aside to get underneath them. I want to be at least 1/8 of an inch from the edge in my beaded piece. I want as much of the backing as I can get, but the beads are in the way, so they're kind of stopping me. This is a stitch that you want to pull to a pretty good tension. So most of the stress people have is measuring where their stitch is. Well, if you go from the middle of there, once you've got a couple on, you can kind of see. So if I'm here, I want to be about here and come up through that bead. So we don't need to stress about it though, because if we get the bead in position when we pull it, then let's say I pick up a bead and I'm way off. I go way over here and I'm up through. Okay, so all I have to do is hold the bead in position while I pull my thread. And on the next one, I want to make sure that I get a little bit closer to straight underneath the hole of the bead and come up through that bead and pull and get my tension. So you'll notice this one's hard. So let's look at the nature of this stitch. It is anchored down here, clearly, but it's also anchored here and anchored here. And it is all three that are going to create the position of that bead. So I don't have to worry if I'm a little close or if I'm a little far. I hold it in position when I pull my tension, and the next beads will take it. Okay, so we've got our mantra. So now I want you to imagine I've beaded all the way around, and I'm just going to get my thread here. So we're going to pretend that there's beads all the way, and here's where I'm at. So we pick up the bead. It doesn't matter. I've been going from front to back. I could also go from back to front. Either way, it is the same stitch, and you can go front to back on one, back to front on the next, and it wouldn't matter. As I approach this anchor thread, I need to pull that out and just let that sit up there. So pick up a bead, go through the backings and up through that bead, And my last, pick up a bead, go through the backings, and up through that bead. So now I've got my first bead and my last bead right next to each other. And here's my 2 threads. So what are we going to do with these? We're going to take our needle thread and go through the first thread, staying on the front side, stitch it to the back. I'm going to put a needle on my tail, stitch through the last bead, staying on the front side, and stitch to the back. So I'm going to take my needle thread and create then that final bridge of the front to the back, staying on the front side and then stitching to the back side. Now whenever you're stitching through an edge bead, the edge is sitting right on the surface of that edge. So when you go through an edge bead, you're either staying on the front or you're staying in the back. In this case, you want to stay to the front. So here's my tail thread. I'm going through my last bead, staying on the front, and stitch toward and then into the back. So now I've completed it. My two threads are next to each other. I can tie a square knot, weave them in, and end it. Basic edge for bead embroidery basics.